Hello everyone. I just wanted to drop in and say hello, Happy New Year, and to welcome you to Season 13 of On the Odd. With the new year here, I am working tirelessly to bring you more of what you enjoy. Discussions about the paranormal, strange, and unexplained. Today I am so excited to share the news that I am launching a Patreon page that offers multiple tiers of unique and unusual rewards for everyone. Even a $1 contribution will go a long way. Please visit patreon.com/ontheodd for more information. Now, I love doing On the Odd, and I'm overwhelmed by the feedback I get from each one of you, not each one of you, but I get from so many of you on a daily basis. As a matter of fact, I love these topics so much that I've been inspired to launch another series of shows called True Tales of, which will be less conversational than On the Odd, also very different than any other talk show. I will even have a series for you to share your own personal tales. On the Odd is here to stay in the form it is today, but we will be expanding the show to 2 episodes a week or 8 or 9 episodes a month. I am excited to share this information with you, and I hope you continue listening and enjoying On the Odd and in the future, True Tales of. Thank you for your time, and I hope to hear from you very, very soon. Please just take a moment to visit patreon.com/ontheodd and consider contributing. You can always email me at mark, M-A-R-K, @ontheodd.com. Send me your artwork, stories, comments. I love to hear from you. Thank you so much, and here's the show.
From the paranormal to the extraordinary, from the weird to the wonderful, this is On the Odd.
Today we have a very special guest. His name is Freddy Silva. He first began researching crop circles in 1990 and is one of the world's foremost experts on crop circles, sacred space, and consciousness. He is the best-selling author of Secrets in the Field, The Science and Mysticism of Crop Circles, which is held by many as the most comprehensive study ever undertaken into this fascinating phenomenon. He's also released a documentary called Stairways to Heaven, The Practical Magic of Sacred Space, as well as several lectures on the genre. Aside from being a best-selling author and independent researcher of ancient systems of knowledge, alternative history, earth mysteries, and esoterica, he appears on GaiaTV, right? Gaia. And the History Channel. Please welcome to the show, Freddy Silva. How are you,
Hello,
Freddy?
Mark. Not too bad.
Thank you for taking the time out today to speak with me. I really do appreciate it. And GaiaTV is one of those things that I keep meaning to subscribe to. It looks really, really fascinating, but I need to know that I have enough time to go through their catalog of work. So, yeah, is GaiaTV one of those, do you work with them constantly, or, how are they? What is your opinion of them?
Well, I mean, it's. I think they're actually at the forefront of, let's say, a great big book where people go to basically place a lot of information, on all matters of dealing with spirituality. Some of it, like anything else, the more you put in there, the more it gets adulterated with things which shouldn't be in there and are very badly researched. But that usually happens with any situation. Nothing's perfect. But I think it's actually one of the better places to go to find things which, give you basically spiritual well-being, but also give you a lot of research on ancient systems of knowledge. And I can't really think of any other place right now on the planet where so much has been put in there as a resource to go and find stuff. But again, it depends how you only get so much out of watching television. I actually haven't watched television in 20 years, and I used to be in advertising, so that tells you something. If something gets my attention, I obviously my curiosity is piqued, and I will go and read a really good book that's been well researched, because you're only reading a synopsis on television of something much greater. And that's true of my work as well. I mean, people will comment on some of my work on some of my documentaries that I submitted to Gaia, and they'll say, wow, I wish I could know more. I said, well, yeah, that's based on a book. What I've given you is a 2% synopsis of what's actually in there. So you really got to do the homework. There's no shortcut to any of this stuff, which I find, especially today where society is becoming so, and I'll say this, lazy, for lack of a better word, that we don't take the time to look carefully at the things that we should be looking at and take time to digest them. And that requires sitting down quietly, reading, and, absorbing the information in a way that you can actually think about it. Because I had a sort of a discussion with a few friends of mine about how the more work we do on a computer, for example, and we read things on a screen, the less I find that I can actually retain. And it's not just because I'm getting older. It is actually true. And there was a study that was done that says that because of the way your eyeballs look at a screen, and because of the way that your eyeball acts almost like a screen in itself, sending images to the brain, because of the difference and the between the flicker rate on a screen and your eyeball, you can only take in so much. And there was a study done that says that about 32% of what you actually read on a screen actually goes into your head. So that's quite scary. So that's why I go back to good old paper, because you're reading at your own pace. There's nothing flickering back at you except for a piece of paper, and you tend to retain more. And it means that you can also process the information and then use that wonderful filter to figure out right from wrong. And, I think we have a wonderful tool to express all this wonderful knowledge, and it's all coming together. But we're also sort of throwing a lot of the baby out with the bathwater, because we're not taking the time to properly process it. So it's a blessing and a curse, modern technology.
Yeah, I come from publishing as well. I mentioned I come from a newspaper background, but I also worked for a publishing company. And I love paper, and I love books, physical, tangible books, but I don't give it the respect that a lot of people do. I'm the guy who folds the book behind. I like to get in there and read, but I also will read with a highlighter or a pen. So, it's sacrilege to a lot of people. But you cannot circle a part, put a Post-it on top, and then ask somebody to read something so easily when it's on a screen or in a Kindle or any of these things. I know they have, they have little things and you can take snippets, but there's nothing like handing you a book and with a little stupid Post-it and says, read this paragraph. It's going to change your life, There's nothing like it. And, I wish I could spend more time reading. I just realized a year ago I thought I was reading faster as I got older, but I'm learning I was getting I was becoming a lazy reader, and I was just reading through things instead of actually reading them.
Exactly.
I'm trying to become a little bit more conscious of that. Last night my son had a sleepover. I was talking to you about this, and I brought up the subject of crop circles. And as a 10-year-old, I miss being a 10-year-old, because I think we all do. Everything is new.
But you get free toys.
Well, there's no such thing as free. I know how much those Legos cost. Jeez.
No, if you're a 10-year-old, it's free.
Well, we're jerks. We make him spend his like birthday money sometimes if it's something where it's like you really don't need an 80th pound of Legos. So, it's one of those things where
I don't know.
no, I know it's
one of the best toys ever developed.
Legos are excellent. It's just he has so many of them, but he constantly needs to add to the collection, and it's like, all right, well, make something.
Back in the day, we didn't have windows. We'd have to use the little clear Legos to give the impression of a window. We didn't have rail tracks. We had to use the single rail pieces and stick them together in the fore section to create a rail track. And even the wheels were square. I mean, and that really teaches you critical thinking. I mean, you are limited with what you have, but your imagination fills the gap. I think we've lost that.
Well,
I think
you know what?
I really should go back to that kind of thinking. It's tactile.
Are you familiar with the video game Minecraft?
I've heard of it, but I don't really play it.
Think of it as Legos, as a video game. And that's it. There's no winning, there's no losing, there's no point system. You're just creating. And I love it. My son also does a little bit of coding for his age. And like a little Python, a little bit here and there. I'm sorry.
It's definitely live.
No, I thought that was me. I'm sorry.
Hey, everybody, this is a live broadcast. I knew there was something I forgot to do.
No, it's fine. Anyway, to make a long story short, Minecraft is like Legos, but you just build, and he builds like roller coasters and stuff like that. It's really kind of cool. And this has almost nothing to do with crop circles, except I brought crop circles up to him and his friend who stayed over my house last night, and they'd never heard of it. And they went right to YouTube and they were looking it up. But then I'm thinking, now we bring up GaiaTV, and I'm wondering, I bet you Gaia has some awesome stuff that you said that you've submitted a number of documentaries to them. So I don't know. I'm going to make a little bit of a note here to look up Gaia, because I'd rather him watch something that's well thought out, well researched, and thoughtful, and then somebody who's just kind of copy and pasting something and hoping for the best if there's any type of real research behind it.
Exactly. I mean, there's a documentary on there. I think you mentioned it earlier, called "Stairways to Heaven." It's pretty old now. I mean, you can tell that it was obviously done about 20 years ago, but the information is actually still very good, and it's a very quick synopsis of the book. And it pretty much lays down some of the heavy research that was conducted back in the day when most crop circles were real. The situation is reversed today. Most of them are hoax nowadays. It was like a conversation that began in the late 70s and kind of came to a close by about 2003. But still, the information is extraordinary. I mean, for example, we've discovered new mathematical theorems from the real crop circles. There is technological information, a bit like the film Contact, ironically, where I
love that movie.
Oh, it's a wonderful movie. In fact, it was scary watching it and seeing that this is actually what we're dealing with in the fields. I mean, I'm really not kidding here. It was a very serious work. And that there was this contact with I won't use the word extraterrestrial because people have different ideas of what that means, but it's certainly a non-local consciousness. That I can say for sure. And they're very well-meaning. They've been around here before. They always keep popping up in human history. And they did say that there would be things that would be used for healing modalities, and it's come true, and also technological information to do with the illusion of gravity. And they left it at that. And so far, I know 3 groups of scientists, one in England, one in America, one in Australia, who have actually built the crop circle on the cover of my book. That's why I put it there. And they've actually built it in 3D, and they said, yes, it does defy gravity. We have an anti-gravity device. So they're just waiting for the right political moment to bring this out, because like the water-powered car that has been designed several times, all of those people seem to die of unusual circumstances very quickly after announcing it to the world. So they're being very careful about this. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist, by the way. I'm just telling you the facts the way they are. So it's perhaps one of the most important phenomenons out there. And it's not surprising that people have, polarizing opinions about it, because there is a lot of disinformation, misinformation out there about crop circles. A lot of it's well-meaning. There's a lot of people who are just excited by the phenomenon, but they really have no clue what it is they're actually promoting. I could honestly say that there's only a handful of researchers such as myself that actually are still alive and still kind of keeping track of it. I think I can probably count like 4 people that are still keeping track of it. And it really is a very, very sensitive phenomenon. But you were mentioning your kids. I remember a situation years ago when I was promoting the book, and I was in California, and a teacher had come up to me after a major conference and said, well, would you like to present to my class? And they're like 10-year-olds. I'm thinking, oh, God, I can't think of anything more horrible than presenting to 10-year-olds because they know how to destroy you and totally unmask you as a fraud. And I thought, I'll do it anyway. It's a challenge. And but I thought, well, I can't really pitch it in the way that I do to grown-ups, and I can't really patronize them either. I think I'll just show pictures and see where it goes. And my God, did they get excited about it? In fact, within a minute, they're all suggesting ideas and information that we hadn't come up with.
That's what they were doing last night. It was blowing me away. It's like, well, do you think it could be a portal to a parallel universe? It's like, yeah, that's actually one of the theories.
Actually, that's pretty close. We've actually monitored that, and NASA's actually released some information that's actually linked to that. Not necessarily to the crop circles, but they have discovered that the Earth is connected to the Sun and other parts of the universe, and they actually use the word portals, and they do come down to the Earth, and they seem to be connecting to these other magnetic portals somewhere near the Van Allen belt outside the Earth. And all the crop circles, in fact, every single sacred site in the world, they all basically exist at the same power places. So there is something very important that's going on here. And there are no end of stories of people, going back thousands of years that actually regard temples, such as the pyramid or Stonehenge, being a sort of a connection to another level of reality. And we've just proved that actually is correct. And the same thing is happening with the crop circles too. They're built exactly on the same principles as a pyramid. They just happen to be made with flattened crop. So it's as though, the gods have come back to show us something that we've kind of lost track of, which is very important in our society and where we're headed right now.
Well, there's a certain elegance and natural... there's something about them when you look at them. And I'm referring to the ones that you're calling the real crop circles. And I mean, personally, I can't really tell the difference, except I'm going to say people got better at hoaxing.
They certainly have.
With everything, UFOs, everything in the world is, there's so much noise out there. It's hard to really tell what is legitimate and what is just flat out a really great hoax that is terrible, in my opinion.
It's very true. And in fact, someone made a prophetic comment when the book was released. They said, if you're going to release this information, which you have to, I mean, that's how you educate the public. And they said the hoax is going to get a lot better. And you know what? The year after, it really did get a lot better, at least visually, because they suddenly understood that, a lot of the attraction is the harmonic that you create out of the mathematical relationships in the design. They didn't know that before I printed the information. So visually they got better, but they still can't replicate what really is fundamentally behind the real phenomenon, and that is that these are highly sensitive electromagnetic zones which differ from the area around them. So you can actually take a meter, for example, electric meter, and actually walk around the field and get specific readings. The moment you cross the perimeter of a real crop circle, that meter goes through the roof. You are now inside a kind of force field, a very rarefied electromagnetic environment. I've seen a lot of people try to make crop circles, and they cannot replicate that effect. They can also can't replicate the cellular changes that take place in the plants, nor they are able to leave the plants undamaged. Because if you and I were going to go out with a garden roller, and believe me, they do use garden rollers sometimes, and planks of wood to flatten the crop.
Right, well, that's the way I've seen it before.
Yeah, you create damage, and the real ones are not damaged. The plants are literally bent 90 degrees above the soil, and they're floating above the soil. I've been to these first thing in the morning before anyone's been in there, and I tell you, the pain of having to be the first person to crush the plants is horrible. I actually take my shoes off. I try to be as careful as possible, but you can hear the air being squeezed out from under your feet, and you think, it's like stepping on a work of art. It's really difficult, but you got to do the research. You got to collect the soil samples, and you send them to laboratories, and you have them blind tested. And it turns out the soil's been tampered with as well. There's an increase in nitrates, which is partly to do with the electromagnetic frequency that's actually interred in the actual design. And as part of the creation process, the gravitational field has been altered as well. So the roots of the plants are pointing in the wrong direction to where they usually are supposed to go. So all of these things are non-hoaxable. No matter how many people have tried to doing it, they cannot replicate that kind of thing. And that's what the crux of the matter is, because when your body, which is essentially a great big walking electromagnetic vessel, it walks into another room or an environment where the frequencies are slightly different, your DNA reacts to that and it starts picking up information. And again, thousands of volunteers and a lot of skeptics who have gone into crop circles, and they'll start channeling information. I'm talking technical data here, and it frightens the hell out of them, because they went in there thinking this is just something made by some bored farmer. And when they come out, they are not the same people. They realize something has interacted with them in a very positive way, and it's given them a little inkling of what happens in a state of reality that is not quite ours, and yet it's not quite an out-of-body experience either. It's a very bizarre feeling. It's a bit like shamanism, I guess. But this is the crux of the matter, that the circles are influencing the human body to an extraordinary degree. Years ago, there was a woman in California who wrote a great book monitoring the frequency of the human body. And we found that everything inside the body is vibrational. So, your liver has a frequency, your eyeball has a frequency, and so forth. And she found that when you map all of this on a straight line, there's a big gap, as though your body's missing several radio stations. And the frequency range happens to match exactly the frequency range that we find in the crop circles, and it's multiplied 10 times. So the crux of the matter is that the crop circles are adding a certain electromagnetic frequency that interacts with the human body and is waking something up that is sitting there waiting to be awoken, for lack of a better word. And people do react to this, and they do have these experiences, and then they become researchers in their own right. And again, they walked in as skeptics, but they walk out as very different people.
How do you feel when you're in front, and when you're in this environment where a crop circle has been created? Do you feel something? Is this something where, sometimes when people are in an area where a terrible crime is committed, there's a certain heaviness. I think that I personally feel that humans can pick up on these things. And I guess, what kind of energies do you feel there? And do you feel as though it how does it affect you personally?
Well, when I first began to research it, it's very interesting to get excited about something, and you get carried away with your excitement.
Sure.
And a lot of the results tend to be psychosemantic. You're going to get back what you're putting into it. So you basically have to learn at a very early stage that not to get carried away with your excitement, because you're going to believe what you want to believe, and that's of no use to anyone if you're as a researcher and you're trying to educate people as to what's right and wrong. So I learned very quickly to sort of calm my enthusiasm, and it's funny you should mention that, because the first crop circle that I actually got taken to, I didn't know it at the time. It was a test. I was actually working with the expert on the subject at the time, and he was testing me out because he could see that I'm very eager to help and be part of this process of understanding what this is all about. But he also wanted to figure out where I was at, and he confided in me months later that the first crop circle he took me to was a hoax. And when I got there, I said, you know what, I was expecting something else. And he was saying to me, well, what were you expecting? And I said, I don't know, but this is not what I was expecting. This feels normal. There's nothing unusual about it. I actually feel quite disappointed. And he didn't say anything. And then he got a phone call, and he said, well, if you're not doing anything for the next couple of hours, there's a brand new crop circle that just appeared. I just got a call from the farmer. It wasn't there the night before. It literally just appeared. And we know from record that there's 80 eyewitnesses around the world, including policemen, that have seen these things appearing in less than 15 seconds, regardless of the size. And these are unanimous eyewitness accounts. And policemen did not make things up.
Have they seen them being formed?
Absolutely,
wow.
Right in front of their very eyes. So there's 80 of those people around the world, and we kept those pretty quiet from the hoaxes for a long time. It was kind of like the ace in the card, so to speak, in case they brought out some damaging information against us. So we'd play that card, and then they'd have to go away and think about what they just said. So it takes me to another crop circle, and I tell you, I felt like I got out of the car, and this thing's about a quarter of a mile away on a hill, and it's like a big hand just literally pinned me to the side of the car. It was like this wave of invisible energy that just hit me. I still will not forget it to this day. And you go in there, and all your equipment's malfunctioning because, again, you're walking into an energetic environment that does tamper with electronic equipment. And I can't tell you how many cameras, expensive cameras, especially with the BBC, who has lost several cameras going into crop circles trying to interview us. It just tampers with electric equipment. Wow. And even helicopters don't want to fly over them. Because
but it makes sense because of you're saying, I mean, if an EMF detector can pick up on it, it easily could be something that really would mess upon small electronics and even large ones.
Absolutely, and it becomes a very expensive phenomenon. But after a while, and I had no idea that this was possible, I had heard of this anecdotally, was that you begin to your body begins to act like a bit of blotting paper. It begins to soak up that energy, and now I can see energy as clearly as I'm watching the computer right now. I know where it's going. I know which direction it's coming from, the polarity. Most people need electrical devices to pick up this stuff, or if you're a good dowser, you can pick up just using a couple of what we call the bent coat hangers. Mm-hmm. It's a very, very old profession, and the oil companies use dowsers today as well. So it's not a figment of the imagination. And today, I can pretty much tell a real one from a fake just by looking at the photograph, which is not a very scientific way of doing it. And I don't really sort of transmit that to most people. But and then you go there and do the homework. You actually have to get down on your knees and look at the plants and look at the soil and do the analysis. And it turns out that, yes, your body is very good at telling you right from wrong. It's what we call the gut feeling. It's there for a good reason. And like you said, you go and buy a house, you can tell a good house from a bad house because you're picking up the vibe of the people that have been there. And that electronic frequency goes into the brick, and the brick has quartz in it, and quartz is the kind of stuff that you find in your computer, which, of course, stores information. So all of these things that we laugh at and think as being far-fetched are now are at the very forefront of science as being very subtle mechanisms in the way the universe works, and specifically the human body. So we're very highly tuned and sensitive instruments. It's just that we get talked out of this. And before Isaac Newton and all the rationalists appeared 300 years ago, this was a matter of fact, everyday stuff. It's just that the last 300 years we've been talked out of thinking that unless you can see it and touch it and smell it, it doesn't exist. But the irony is that we're now developing the kind of technology like NASA just found that we can actually pick up on the subtle energy, and it's all around us. So yes.
I quote Stanton Friedman. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's
lovely guy.
Yeah, he's a really great guy. I spoke to him a few weeks ago, and he was saying it's a pretty famous quote of his. He said he's never seen a UFO before, but he's written a number of books on it and everything. But he's also never seen an atom before. So, but he knows it exists. Exactly. There's just too much evidence to support his, the phenomenon that he's focusing on to just turn his back on it. The difference, though, that I find very interesting is that debunking a UFO versus debunking a crop circle is completely different, because you're saying, there's physical evidence. There's traces of it happening. These are things that are measurable. These are real world things that humans can actually see. I mean, UFOs may leave these things, but we're unaware of them. I think that's
and
really
the pictures that
interesting.
we take are actually in focus.
Right? Yeah, it's always ridiculous that we can't get a UFO in focus. But I've said to people a number of times, with all of the fakery that's out there, there's if it's in focus, the first thing somebody's going to say is it's fake. So how real does something have to be or look, or how fake does something have to look or feel to convince the general public? And it's too late to convince the general public unless we're going to open the UFO museum and actually show you the anti-gravity, equipment. And it's kind of the same thing with what you're talking about, but there is a lot of evidence to support. I'm really fascinated by the work that's being done by deciphering these. I'm going to call them messages. I'm not really sure if that's accurate, but they're being deciphered, and people are building hardware that is, touching upon the world of levitation. This is the missing link of what we need in our world, right?
Exactly, and I think it's a very good. I think the phenomenon's a very good mirror of how far we've actually stopped believing in magic. I mean, back in the old days, magic was nothing more than the manipulation of the laws of nature, and today magic is some trickery. I think we've come down to a point in civilization where we've become so cynical, and the thing is, we're exposed to so much information. The first time in living history where we have so much. And yet, ironically, we know so little. We are so confused by all the information that we're hit with. I think a lot of people are beginning to lose the grasp that they have a filter, and you can actually just step back for a second and and corroborate information that you've read. Read a couple of sources and compare them, and then come to some kind of opinion. But people today are just so quickly to dismiss everything that they're literally, again, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I think the crop circles are pretty much a mirror of society and how high it's risen, and yet how far away from the natural world it's fallen. So it's kind of timely that these things are happening, because they're reminding people who are interested and they have an open mind to see, okay, there's something much bigger going on here. We are obviously being given information. And by the way, all this information was channeled originally before the crop circles even appeared in England. A part of what we were doing was actually scientifically validating the work of a channeler who works with the police and the military to solve crimes. So she thought it was weird that she was getting all this information. She had no idea what was going on. And we thought, well, wait a minute, this is some kind of information that's been given to us by some consciousness, because they're giving us actual coordinates, and they would actually tell us where the crop circles were going to be. And we'd go there a week later, and sure enough, that's where they were. And that's how we began to trust the source. And from there, we were led bit by bit. And we would, evaluate things scientifically. We'd publish the information, and slowly we came to the conclusion that there is an educated consciousness behind the phenomenon, and it means well, and it wants to give us information. It wants to give us. There's also a bit of a warning built in. They were saying that some of the crop circles are not really meant for humans. They're meant for the Earth. The Earth needs to evolve. You've been living in really quiet times, geologically speaking, and we have. And it needs to evolve, and you need to be prepared for the fact that Earth changes are upon you. And unless you're prepared, all of you are going to basically die. And this has happened again and again and again, but there are always survivors, because you know what? They were prepared. They knew that the cycle of life is circular. Things come around. For example, there's the great debate now about the Younger Dryas event that gave us the Great Flood 11,000 years ago. Well, people survived that because they were well aware by watching nature and observing the skies that every 2 weeks of the Earth around November crosses the Taurid meteor shower, and that meteor shower is full of debris from a broken comet from God knows how long ago. But the problem is that wonderful meteor shower that we look up at the sky every November, at certain points in history, it has some big chunks of rock which do cause a lot of problems. And even as early as 2600 BC, we were hit with some fragments of that, and it created, again, a rise in sea level, major destruction. across the face of the earth, and this happens periodically. And what we were being told with the crop circles is you got to keep track of what's happening in the sky, because it's going to come around again in your lifetime. You need to be prepared, like anything else. And in the meantime, they're giving us information about anti-gravity and how to create systems of propulsion that don't rely on fossil fuels. And the message was not to rely on fossil fuels, because you're literally killing your own oxygen. You're going to die from suffocation and from the fact that your planet's overheating. Well, that's all come true, because that was given to us 30 years ago. We now call it climate change. So they're well aware of the curve. So they're being very helpful with these symbols and this language, both in terms of technical information, but also as a preparatory idea to reacquaint us with our history, which is basically the inheritance of sacred spaces around the world, for which were built exactly for the same reason, and that was to connect you with another level of reality when you forget that you are part of a much bigger picture. We're not just flesh and bone. We're actually connected to other levels of reality, which explains why between 2 and 3 in the morning, we go off on these wonderful adventures in our dreams. We meet people we've never met in our daily lives, and yet they seem so real. Well, that's because your soul has left the body. Because at that moment on the face of the earth, the sun is furthest away from that face of the earth, which means the local gravitational field is weaker. That's all that is necessary to allow your soul to leave the body and go astral traveling. And it goes to places which are very, very real on the matrix of the universe. And then you come back down very quickly into your body, because a car alarm goes off next door at 4 in the morning. And they're basically saying that, you're part of a much bigger cog that you're not really aware of. But to be aware of that basically makes you responsible for the fact of what you're doing here on Earth. And the repercussions of what you do down here will echo throughout the universe. So everybody outside of the Earth is also very concerned about what we're doing to ourselves, but also that the ripples that we do here are having an effect on them. Everything is all very interconnected. And if this sounds all like New Age mumbo jumbo, well, actually it is. But it's actually very, very real and very true. So that's pretty much what the message of the crop circles was really about. And it wasn't anything new. It was something that was said in 2600 BC when they finished building the pyramid. It was built also in 10,000 BC when they began to put down the foundations of the oldest temples in the world. And this message was the same then. It's about being aware of your environment, knowing yourself, not being fooled by deception, and living a life that basically allows you to be aware of your presence on Earth. Make the best of it, and then when you leave, make sure you leave the place a little bit better than when you found it.
I find it's always mumbo-jumbo when somebody doesn't believe something. I wanted to ask you about those kind of sacred spaces and if there's a correlation between a couple things. I don't know if you have also, I'm sure you have, investigated ley lines, and whether there's a correlation between those and the locations of these crop circles. Also, what about the size of diameter wise, or the angles that are being used? Is there something that is across the board? And if there is, are we talking random numbers, or are we talking something metric or imperial? Obviously, I would think that would be a red flag. If it was exactly 18 feet in diameter, it's like, all right, well, where'd you come up with 18 feet? But, I'm wondering, and also the fake ones, do you find kind of red flags like that? Kind of like something's exactly 20 feet, in diameter. It's like, all right, clearly that was done by a person.
Yeah, the crop circles, just like the old sacred sites, they're all using a very unusual system of measure. It's called a megalithic yard. It was actually a term coined by an engineer called Alexander Thom, who went around measuring hundreds and hundreds of stone circles in Europe. And he was not happy with the fact that they all seemed to be coming up with bizarre fractions using the imperial system. And he figured, if the ancients were very clever, and they were exceptionally clever, by the way. I mean, we can't even build a chair that stops wobbling, let alone a pyramid. That,
exactly.
Is zero north. And they used a system of measure that is derived as a fraction of the actual diameter of the Earth. And they extrapolated from that something called the megalithic yard, which is exactly 2.72 feet. And that's what the crop circles are based on. And the stone circles are based on the same thing, and so is the Great Pyramid and so forth. But here's the best part. How did they come up with this numerical value? Well, this is what I like to know, because that numerical value is also found at the very center of matter. So if you take the two basic building blocks of matter, which is essentially the sphere and the tetrahedron, essentially the building blocks of anything you care to think of, if you take a sphere and put inside it a tetrahedron so that its points touch exactly the inside of the surface of the sphere, you have a relationship, and that numerical relationship between the two surface areas is exactly 2.72. So how do they figure this out, and how did that also translate into an imperial measurement? Well, because our imperial system is based on the Egyptian system, which itself is based on an accurate measure of the Earth.
Freddie, it's a coincidence, all right?
It's all a coincidence, of course.
It's a total coincidence, all right?
So these things are done deliberately, and the crop circles are based also on. When I've seen people going out with a plank, and they start off with a pole, they make a hole, and they go round and round and round. Well, but that's not a real crop circle. The real ones, and even the very simple ones, which I find beautiful, they're based on a specific curve, which is the golden ratio. It's the ratio that nature uses to create all its organisms, as you'd expect. So it has a beautiful and unmistakable flow about it. And also, a real crop circle is never starts at the center. The iteration point is always off center. Sometimes the point from where it begins is 20 feet from the physical center, which is a bit of a problem for hoaxers, because in order to make a circle, you have to have a pole, and then you go around the pole and you create a circle. Well, surprise, surprise, the real crop circles are not perfectly circular. They're slightly oval-shaped.
Oh, so it's kind of like a globe in a way. Like
Exactly.
It's like the epicenter of a globe it would be a fixed point in space, but it would not be exactly center, because the Earth is not a perfect sphere.
It's not a perfect sphere because, of course, it's based on the movement of the spiral motion, which can never, ever become a perfect sphere. So that's one secret which they haven't quite mastered yet. But yes, but you are right. And there also is a relationship to the energy lines. Ley lines are very different, by the way. There's a big confusion about that. Ley lines are actually geometric alignments between three or more elements that share a common purpose. Energy lines are the Earth's natural electromagnetic pathways, just like we have, vessels and meridians in the human body. The Earth has them too. The military knows about them because when they conduct exercises on Salisbury Plain in England, they find that when they cross one of these energy lines, because they have thousands working with them, by the way, they admit it, they'll find that at a certain point in the day when the energy becomes active and they have tanks and other machines crossing, everything in the engines basically stops. It stalls engines, it plays about havoc with electrical equipment, and their field radios don't work either. They then have to basically either wait for this energy to decrease, which it does every 12 minutes or so, for them to restart the engines, which is kind of embarrassing if you're trying to start a war. But the sacred sites, without exception, are all located exactly on the hotspots where these lines cross. The crop circles are also based exactly on the same perimeters, and in fact, they are influencing the local sacred sites wherever they appear around the world. So, for example, in Canada, in the Canadian Prairie, where we get the second highest concentration of crop circles in the world, if you find a crop circle in the middle of a prairie and you think, well, it has to be a hoax because it's not anywhere near any Native American sacred sites. Well, you have to go and do a little bit of homework. You go to the local library and you find that before the farmers plowed all of these mounds, and by the way, there's no one buried in most of these mounds. They're really marking what you can't see. They're marking the hot spots of energy. So they find that these mounds were plowed out, and sure enough, the mounds are only 100 yards away from the crop circle. And you bring out your equipment and you find, yes, the crop circle is sharing exactly the same electromagnetic line or pathway as that mound. So they are influencing and recharging the sacred sites. Again, because, we stopped using these places of power long ago. About 2,000 years with the rise of religion, we've been taught that it's bad to go to these sacred sites. It's all to do with paganism.
Yeah, it was like really big in the 80s and the 90s that, hey, Stonehenge, there's some, demonic stuff going on there. And it's like, what are you talking about? Like,
Exactly.
How do you know?
Yeah,
Also,
one person's angel becomes another person's devil if they don't like what you see, and that's what happened with the religion. And Catholicism is obviously the big culprit here.
Sure.
They turned everything that they stole from other cultures, including the Gnostic Christians, by the way, which are very different to what Catholicism has become. Even the Gnostic Christians believed in all of this that I'm talking about, and that's why they lost. The fundamentalists won the day by basically, being very fundamental. Not much fun and very mental. And they basically turned the whole thing on its head to the point where the pentagram became a symbol of evil. Well, the pentagram is the geometry of every living organism on the face of the earth, including you and I.
Right.
So how can that possibly be evil? It's a completely false interpretation of what was really going on.
Yeah, it's interesting. The pentacle is also, I believe it's the pattern of Venus in the sky. It's a symbol for women. It's where the Olympic 5 circles come from. These are all things that are not negative.
Yeah, and they come from very ancient systems of belief. As a graphic designer by trade, I can tell you that, we don't sit down and create these demonic symbols like people have seen the demonism and the Audi logo, for example. I can tell you it's absolute nonsense. We literally go and research something that literally represents the meaning behind the product. That's what we used to do in the old days. And most times I'd used to go and actually end up at these very ancient symbols, research them and find what did they really mean back then. And of course, they're all very highly motivated and highly spiritual concepts, which are all based on the observation of nature. So this is one reason why people like going to either to the Great Pyramid or they go to the one next door, because they may look the same, but the angles of geometry that creates their slope are ever so slightly different. And it does create a very different energetic environment. You go to the Great Pyramid and some people go, oh no, I don't want to be in here. And you just traveled halfway around the world to be there, but suddenly you don't feel good. And you go out and you go, I want to go to the one next door. And I ask people, well, why? They're both the same. And of course, they're not. And I say, I don't know. There's something about this pyramid. I don't want to be there, but I want to go to this one. And they can't explain it. And then I explain to them that, yes, one is built with one angle, one is built with another. And the angles shape the environment which prepares your body to receive a certain kind of information. Now, the Russians picked up on this back in the 60s because they were hard up for money. And they figured, well, wait a minute, what if it's true? If geometry in a certain environment, for example, a cathedral, Gothic cathedrals are well known for encoding sacred geometry. What if we actually measure the effect of geometry on a human body? And they did. They went to the Gothic cathedrals and they found by strapping a person with all of these little devices that measures all of their skin resistivity and their brain impulses, they found that when you stand a person upright in the middle of the nave of a Gothic cathedral, your brain waves go 4,000% above normal waking state. And I said, no wonder people are getting healed in these places, because there's something about the geometry and the environment that they're in. And of course, there's also the stone and the electromagnetism that's also hardwired into it. But the geometry is fundamental. They said that if we start building rooms shaped like pentagrams, which is the ancient symbol of healing, technically people should get better. And guess what? They did it in Bulgaria, and people would walk into these rooms shaped like pentagrams, and the rate of healing went up dramatically. Schizophrenic patients that were put in rooms shaped like trapezoids were healed of their condition, and so on. So by being hard up for money, the Russians actually worked out that the ancient people actually knew what they were doing. Again, in nature, and then you apply that in.
Yeah. You still there? Actually, cut out for a sec. Are you still there? You were just saying ancient Um,
Getting hit by the CIA now.
I'm sorry. Yeah, you got cut out for a second, just for a second. Hopefully, I was going. It's funny. I was just writing down a note because I remember this exact date I wanted to bring up because I never believed in this type of stuff. I never believed you can heal with angles and all of the philosophy behind this. I was a complete non-believer. And I worked.
Oh, it's good to question.
Yeah. But I was too young to really be questioning. But back in 1993, I started working in basically a Long Island head shop without all of the tobacco products, and basically it was called Futons in Paradise. We sold futon beds, but we also carried a number of alternative press books, and crystals, and it was a new age shop that sold beds, and we the owner of the shop, this guy, Bob Davis, who is a professional body surfer, he built a perfect copper pyramid covered in different crystals and everything. And I just thought this guy was a lunatic. And, but it took me about a year and a half of knowing him and seeing that when he would get a cold, he would do meditation in there, or a number of different things. He got Lyme disease, and he was able to beat it, he felt anyway, like 75% quicker by doing meditation in the pyramid. And it was this huge, undertaking. It was a pretty big sized pyramid for him to sit in. And it's just one of these things. He still uses it to this day. He lives out in California. And I started reading more and more about it, and it makes sense that when you surround yourself with, whether it be certain stones, and it could be stones that, like you were saying, what the cathedrals could be built from, or the shapes, or these equations, and you surround yourself with this, it's definitely putting yourself in a state of higher consciousness that you don't even have to believe. It's just going to work.
Yeah, I mean, it's the more things you pile on top of each other, the more layer caking you do, obviously the process gets much easier. Again, if you the principles are quite actually straightforward. It just took me 15 years to work them out. You have energized water at each sacred site. You have electromagnetism. You have a certain influence of the geomagnetic field and also the gravitational field. Mm-hmm. Geometry, the right kind of stone, which is the reason why they dragged stones from 400 miles away when the local stone would have done just as well. And then, when you put all these things together, it creates a certain environment, but there's still something missing. And to a certain degree, you do have to be receptive. You don't have to believe. You have to be receptive.
Right.
I think the human body is part of the equation. And the Hopi said it very well. It's almost like a joke. We're the ones we're waiting for. Because you can't just come down here and expect something else to do it all for you. So all of these things are aids, they're tools, but you also have to be part of the process. So yes, I mean, I do believe that if you put yourself in an environment like the pyramid, yes, things will happen to you, but you have to do the work too. You can't just go into a pyramid in the shop and then curse at the first person that cuts you off at the lights when you leave, because you've just negated the very process that actually was helping you to get better. Or you go home and start drinking junk food, after eating really good raw meat.
Sure, you got to walk the walk, yeah.
Exactly. You have to make the effort. This is where a lot of people get very skeptical about this. They're hoping for an eternal panacea. And when they see that things don't work, then, of course, they become complete skeptics. But they're missing the big point here. The point is that you have to make the effort. You have to keep following on from that prescription, because it's just like the crop circles as well. We had over 1,000 cases of people getting spontaneously healed, and they didn't even believe in this stuff. And we can now measure this, scientifically, and there's a whole science behind the healing with crop circles.
Wow.
And it's exactly the same thing as a pyramid or a Stonehenge. But again, it's because part of you, whether consciously or subconsciously, is working with that element, and the two of you come together, and there's an exchange of information that takes place between one organism and the other. And that's how it works. You have to be wanting to do it as well. So if it doesn't really happen, it's because, part of you really doesn't believe, and just not believing sets up this electromagnetic signal, this package of information that is telling the organism that's trying to help you, I don't believe in this. And of course, just like someone removing the welcome mat from your door, you're not going to help this person because they've already told you that they're putting a block in front of you. Well, why would you help them? But if you're ready and you're able and you're willing to go through the process and make the effort, I've seen magic happen in all levels of society. There was one famous case where there was a person who lived not far from me. Her neighbor was sent home from hospital. She had terminal bone cancer. She was given 72 hours left to live. And she said to me, well, I heard that you designed these cards which had the crop circle symbols and use them for healing. And I said, well, actually, they don't heal. What they do is they store the original frequency of the design on the card through a special process which I really cannot reveal, because it stops people from basically doing silly things with them. And it's a protection thing. I said they carry a frequency, and if it's an organism looking to match the frequency of another organism, if the two overlap, there's an information of exchange that takes place, and then healing follows from that. And she actually applied this sort of very simple system that I didn't develop. I just basically promoted it. It was actually developed in Germany by a company that actually has been doing this for decades, not just with crop circle symbols, but also with ancient symbols as well. They're actually sanctioned by the Austrian government. And some of the stuff that they've done to clean forests and rivers in Europe and, of course, heal people is beyond belief.
Wow.
So this is pure science at work. And sure enough, after working with the crop circle cards, the symbols, and some potentized water, she drove herself to hospital 3 days later. She should have been dead. And she went on living for another 6 months, but eventually she died. So it's a sad story in the end, but we talked about this for quite some time. And I said, well, so what happened? And my friend said, well, the whole idea that a crop circle symbol was able to take her from a point of death completely back to a state of wellness so freaked her out because her belief system was a fundamental Christian. Not that there's anything wrong with that. People believe what they want to believe, and if it makes them happy,
sure,
fantastic. But her belief system basically equated this with witchcraft, which to her was like satanic work, and that's where the disconnect suddenly began. She stopped doing the treatment, and within 6 months she's gone. So, and again, that backed up what we were told, that the organism has to want to be healed in the first place in order for the information to be connected between these two organisms. If you don't want to, they're not going to cure you. It's not how it works. So it was a wonderful lesson, a sad one, but I think it proved the point quite well.
I remember crop circles really being, I said before, really kind of prevalent throughout the 80s, and I still think throughout the early 90s. And, well, I also remember getting very publicly debunked, and people just really bought into it hook, line, and sinker. And I always felt as though there's a very interesting story. I've heard you speak about it in the past, where they, I believe it was the BBC, set up a lot of people to monitor an area where crop circles were either being formed or there was activity, and the military, the British military, I believe, came in overnight and built their own crop circle without anyone noticing. And it looked as though it was kind of, it wasn't a perfect circle. It wasn't geometrically perfect like what we're talking about.
Oh, it was terrible.
But people saw that not only could you do it in secrecy, but you could create it, and people just thought, it's a good enough goof, I'll buy into it. I don't believe in this anymore. But the story doesn't end there, and I wanted to know if you could talk about the Japanese film crew, because without a cover-up, a lot of people don't buy into things. But I find with most things that have a genuine background to it, there's always a cover-up, it seems. A legitimate cover-up, and that's what
absolutely.
This is.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not a conspiracy theorist by any means, and I've lived through all of this. It only takes a small amount of doubt to be put into the public domain to take 50% of the public out of the equation. And once you do that, it's very simple to manipulate public perception. The elections in this country were a wonderful example of what happened. All you have to do, put a bit of doubt, you have people fighting over each other, and we've ended up with this mess. And it really is a mess. Let's not be coy about it.
Right. We stopped looking at the what could have happened, and instead we are fighting with our neighbors.
Yeah, and we can't tell fact from fiction, and that's exactly what they want you to do. And meanwhile, they're doing all the dirty work while we're all fighting amongst ourselves. So, people unite. Same thing happened with the crop circles. It's the same technique. And it makes you wonder, of course, if the British military are wasting their time making crop circles, then why would they bother if the whole thing was a hoax in the first place? If it was a hoax, it would go away. It would be of no consequence. The British government has spent a considerable amount of money keeping the crop circles under surveillance. The CIA was involved, and incredibly, the Vatican. Back in the day, before the present Pope, who I actually seem to like, actually. He seems to be saying the right thing and doing the right things at the moment, so we'll see. But back in the day when we had a lesser person on the throne, they thought that the crop circles were the second coming. Except the second coming wasn't talking directly to them. And so they wanted to keep the whole thing under control, pretend the whole thing was a hoax until they can control it. And this is coming from people who are actually infiltrating the hoaxing communities to find out what was really going on. So, yes, the military basically tried to make sure that this new religion wasn't going to get out of control. And they made this hoax. It suddenly brought a whole level of inquiry into the whole study. People began to doubt. And, of course, it made it much more difficult to secure any funding or any credibility in the media. It worked. And then, of course, you have the crop circles became much more daring, and the circumstances and the eyewitness accounts came out. And, of course, something more daring had to be done. And that's when we get the story of Doug and Dave, who came out and said, yeah, we admit it. We made all the crop circles and blah, 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 blah. And that's the story that the public were given. Now, the quality press back then, having gone to the actual meeting and the public relations campaign, they actually wrote, it's much... I find it much easier to believe in Little Green Men than the fact that these two idiots made all the world's crop circles. It may be a little part of the story, but there's a bigger story going on. And that's a direct quote. And they were absolutely right, because when we confronted Doug and Dave with unpublished information...
I just love the way you refer to them as Doug and Dave, like they own an ice cream factory or something.
They should do.
A bunch of dopes.
They should do. They have done a much better job than the job they did of actually ripping off the information that we had published. But they didn't know that 80% of the information had yet to be published. So, and here's the fun part. The camera switched off by then. Everybody went home, and we confronted them at the PR meeting, and we said, really, so you made this specific crop circle in this field in this particular night? And they were very proud of it. Said, yes, really. Well, here's a photograph of another crop circle that appeared on the same night 80 miles away. Who made that? And, of course, they couldn't explain that. And they said, well, it had to be someone else. Because remember, they claimed they made all of them. There was no one else making them. And then they said, really, someone else made the same crop circle on the same evening 80 miles away? Oh, yes. Well, then who made this third crop circle on the same evening in America? That means you guys must be doing time travel, in which case we should be actually analyzing you rather than crop circles. But the public doesn't get to hear about this, you see. And the farmers were also not impressed, because when they were shown what Doug and Dave had actually made, they said, no, that's not like the ones that we've had in our field, because this is all damaged, this is all broken. The ones in our field, there's no damage to the plants. The plants are still perfectly fine. There's something unusual about the soil. In fact, there's a certain fertilizing quality to the soil, because when we plant on the same area the following year, the plants are actually growing twice as fast as the ones around it.
That's crazy. I mean, that's wild, because you mentioned there's a higher level of nitrogen, which is something that people do add to soil to increase, production.
Fertility, yeah.
So it could just be a naturally occurring thing that happens, like a byproduct of this happening. By the way, if you ever find garlic that's grown in with extra nitrogen, you should avoid it, because that's what makes people gassy. I found out. That's why I grow my own garlic in my garden.
On the show, people.
No, but some people are really gassy when it comes to garlic. So if you grow your own in regular old school soil, it'll, and you can grow garlic in anything, but
Yeah.
it's beside the point.
Well, it turns out that the other way to increase nitrates in soil is actually to infuse it with a short burst of a high frequency electromagnetic frequency, which of course is what the crop circles were doing. Up to 146%, because the farmers shouldn't be doing that, and they don't, because if you apply fertilizer or nitrates, you actually burn the plants, so they don't grow at all. And the farmers know the difference between one and the other. And they also said that, on occasion, we've had crop circles appearing in the middle of the night, accompanied by black military helicopters bristling with electronic equipment, and there's steam coming out of the crop circle, and the dogs are barking like crazy before the crop circle appears, because they're picking up the ultrasound, which is one of the actual signatures of the actual real crop circles. The ultrasound is what contains the information that makes the design, and the flattening comes from an infrasonic frequency that then creates an atmospheric pressure that makes the plants do what they do. And if you leave the plants by themselves in a real crop circle, leave them for a week, they begin to come back up and they go vertical.
Oh, that's interesting.
With a man-made one, they're crushed.
They're killed. They're literally crushed, and they probably, with probably 5% of them can actually grow still.
Exactly.
Now, I forgot about animals. How are animals reacting to this afterward? I'm sure people, you can bring your dog and stuff, but I'm wondering, this does often happen in large fields where it might be a farm. I was wondering, do cows continue grazing in this area, or?
They avoid the adjacent area.
Oh, that's interesting.
That's usually one of the signs that something is coming. There is an ultrasonic frequency at work. There's a huge sound component. In fact, the real crop circles, when you compare the shapes to cymatic patterns, which of course the geometric shapes created when sound hits, for example, water, and they're photographed, the shapes are identical. So that was the first clue that we had. The second one is that animals, unlike us, are much more susceptible to ultrasound. Excuse me. And if you walk around the fields and, you kind of use your God-given ability to feel that something might be happening in this general vicinity in the next couple of days, and you'd walk around, there'll be a field full of wheat, and next door there'll be a pasture, and the cows are completely on the opposite side, and you think, and 9 times out of 10, we'd be right, because in the middle of the night, this thing comes down, and there's your crop circle. There's a lot of also bridle ways which adjoin the farms in England. There's a lot of public right-of-way, and people riding horses notice that the horses will be fine going down the bridle way, and suddenly, for no reason, they bolt right past the field in question, and they stop. And next morning, there'll be a crop circle there. People sometimes bring their animals to visit crop circles after they happened. And cats do not like them. They go right up to the edge. They're very curious, but they go right to the edge. When you take them over the perimeter of the crop circle, they bolt right out again.
Wow.
And the dogs behave in a completely opposite direction. They go straight to the crop circle, to the center, and they'll start hovering around, sniffing around, and then they'll go to the actual point of where the energy is, the actual iteration point of the crop circle, not the physical center, and they'll pee all over it, which is very important, because what they're doing is they're marking their territory. They feel there's an energy there, and they're marking their territory. So if you're a researcher, it's very important to get there very quickly to take soil samples, because the dogs have been there. Yeah, it's one of those anecdotes that you sort of laugh at.
I wonder how birds are, it's really, really, I didn't even think about animals, to be honest with you.
Yeah. You don't get to hear about this stuff. You only get to hear about Doug and Dave.
Yeah, Doug and Dave. One passed away, right? I believe.
Yeah, so he must be making half a crop circle now. They must be the ones that are now unfinished. And they knew they were lying right from the start, and we caught them every single time. But again, that never made it to the media. It's pretty sad, but thank God there are books out there that you can actually read and get a different point of view.
Where are crop circles now, in the sense of, are people still making fakes? Are there ones that are popping up where you see them and you think, I'm pretty convinced this is a real legitimate one?
It's funny. It kind of appeared sporadically from the 16th century. We get information about crop circles appearing here and there around the world, but nothing major. But the big influx really came in at the end of the 70s, and there were a lot of eyewitness accounts back then, which we were able to trace. Again, they talk about these tubes of light that come out of nowhere. They rotate the crop within 100 feet of these people, and then they retract in 15 seconds, and that's the big clue. Every eyewitness always said it happens within 15 seconds, and usually in bright daylight as well. And again, these are people who are, astronomers, people who are postal workers, policemen, and again, these people have nothing to gain from telling this to the public because the fear of ridicule is huge. Why would they say something so silly unless there was an element of truth to it? But there was a sense that there was a conversation, and this conversation was not going to last forever. And indeed, and ironically, just after I published my book, they kind of stopped. To this very day, since 2003, I would say maybe 0.2% of the world's crop circles are actually real. In fact, it's the simple ones that tend to be the genuine ones nowadays. It's as though they're fine-tuning something, because the information was given in bulk between 1978 and 2002. After that, they said, we've got to figure it out for ourselves. We've given you the information. You have to do the work.
Isn't it possible that, they gave us what they feel as though we need? And that's
Absolutely.
that. It's like, here's a puzzle. It's your job now.
Exactly. And you hear this again in a lot of myths around the world, usually around the time of great conflagrations. You have some creative force, whether they call them gods or shining ones, Anunnaki, which also get a very bad press, by the way, for all the wrong reasons. You have this group of people or sentient beings or groups of consciousness that seem to appear out of nowhere in ancient cultures, and they're given the incredible information, and the cultures work on it, and then there's a big cataclysm that follows within a couple of 100 years, and they somehow are able to survive and get on with their lives. It seems to be this sort of perpetuation of knowledge and survival and self-development of the human race, and they said that this is something that's been going on for tens of thousands of years. It's nothing new. You're just another manifestation of consciousness on this face of the earth. And after the next catastrophe, there'll be others coming here, and they'll come to play in this sandbox that we've come to know as planet Earth, because that's what it is. It's a big sandbox where we come to experiment, and hopefully some people build really nice sandcastles, and then you get those, the jerks that come along and knock down your sandcastle. But that's the way it's always been. The idea is not to react to the jerks and follow the path that you feel that you were given, and leave the place looking, a little bit better than when you arrived.
I'd love to see people embrace these designs and attempt to recreate them openly. And
in fact, a lot of
turn
people
it into an art. There's no reason to not take credit for something and be proud of it. And try to recreate these things. I don't really understand why there's no movement for that.
Well, because they'll get arrested and they'll go to jail.
Not a farmer, a farmer's son,
Oh, there have been cases that people have been caught and they have gone to, they've been said you got either jail or you pay the farmer compensation for the amount of damage that you've created.
Sure.
So they now have a criminal record. So there is that to take into consideration. But yet, I do know people, people from high walks of life, like engineers, who actually pay the farmers for a field. They'll say, we are going to make a crop circle as a gesture of thanks to the consciousness that we feel is giving us very important information. And they're very upfront about it.
Yeah,
they just don't tell you where it's going to be.
Yeah.
And I tell you, they're the most beautiful man-made designs I've ever seen, and the closest I've seen to the lack of damage in a crop circle. And you know what? I've also seen the next day real crop circles appearing in the adjacent fields as a reaction to what they did.
Yeah, I think there's something there.
Totally. Yeah, it has changed these people. It's made them very spiritual. And I've seen people take the information from the crop circles and apply it in real life. They become better people. They become better healers. They become better politicians. And you can take that on as a matter of fact. There are politicians who do believe in this, and they do apply these concepts in their life, and they're slowly trying to make a change in the public world. So there's a lot of stuff actually going on behind the scenes that we're not aware of, where the information is being applied for the common good. You just don't get to hear about it because good news rarely makes headlines.
Yeah, the general public, for whatever reason, is not allowed to have the information that things of this nature are being done. I don't know why there is a fear of it. Maybe it's too much of a throwback to the past.
Oh, I think it's more simple than that. I mean, I worked in the media for many years, and I was under the same idea. But you know what? The actual answer is much simpler, Mark. And it really comes down to selling newspapers and selling media. When you have so many papers doing exactly the same thing and being in a competitive environment, and when you find that tragedy sells more papers, they all end up following the same lead. It's kind of sad, but that's actually what it comes down to. I remember a newspaper that was around in England I believe it's at the turn of the century. They had a credo that said, we are going to publish nothing but good news, positive stories. You know what? They survived for 23 years and then went under because people got tired of reading good news. I think that there's a gene that's built into human beings, and I'm going to be sarcastic and funny at the same time about this, so don't take it to heart.
I won't.
That is either self-destructive or is partly Jewish in all of us. We have the oy vey gene. It's like, oy vey, something's not going to happen as well today.
Well, you know what it is? We as people like to talk shit about people.
I'm sorry?
I think as people and with modern media, we like to talk shit about people. And we don't mean it I don't think we mean to be mean about it, but we get mean about it. And I totally understand where you're coming from with that. And it really isn't like, oy vey, it really,
I need to release.
Yeah. It's, we love to roll our eyes. We love to, goof on things. And I don't know. I don't know why we love it so much. And, I'm totally a victim of this where I'll jump on, I avoid Facebook now because, unfortunately I get sucked in. Next thing you know, I've just wasted time where I should be researching, crop circles and having better questions for you. But instead I'm, reading about some stupid tweet that somebody sent, it's really, mesmerizing right now.
Just click unfriend. That's what you do. Just click unfriend.
You said you haven't watched television for 20 years?
Yeah.
In general. I mean, clearly you've watched some TV, but
some of it, obviously, if someone brings it to my attention that there's a program I should be watching, I'll watch it. I'll find a way to either get it out of the library or I'll find a way on the internet to find it.
Do you subscribe to any of these services, though? Like Prime Video or Netflix or...
No, I get my DVDs from the library, and I mean DVDs from the library.
Yeah.
We still have a DVD store here in Portland, Maine, and I use them religiously. I want to keep them in business. But no, I mean, Gaia, of course, I'm a natural subscriber because so much of my documentaries are on there, so I get it for free.
You really don't need much more than this, though. I also have a phenomenal library. We have red boxes everywhere, and very often my son, he was like, I want to watch this, and it's like, you know what? It's $1.50. Sure, let's grab it. Or we go to the library. We're already paying ridiculous taxes, so we may as well take advantage of our library, which carries Blu-rays and everything.
Yeah, I mean, if something's really well worth watching, it would have been in the book. And if it hasn't had a chance to be printed, where you can actually look at the references and cross-reference and find out where did they get this stuff? How did they reach this conclusion? I always have a barometer by what makes a good book. Look at the size of the bibliography. That at least tells you that they've done the homework. They may not be right, but at least they've done the homework.
Right.
But sometimes there are those people who don't have that luxury of publishing, and publishing is in a terrible state right now. And there are some documentaries which are really worth watching. I was just actually commenting on one which I've quoted in my the book I'm currently writing, which is about the prehistory of New Zealand, which nobody knows about. There's a lot of interesting things happening down there, including a culture of blonde, blue-eyed, and red-haired and green-eyed people that came originally from the Middle East, which appeared before the flood. We call them the gods. So it's part of a project I'm currently researching, and I found it as mesmerizing documentary, and it was as well researched as any good BBC documentary or as a good book. So sometimes there are those that come around on the internet that really do grab your attention. And of course, not being in New Zealand, I hadn't got access to this program, so I had to actually contact the producers to get me a copy of the damn thing and send it in the mail. So if you want to do the work and find out what's really going on, you do have to put the effort into it. It's not as easily as just clicking like on Facebook.
Sure. And also, so you are working on a book on the early history of New Zealand. You are lucky enough to be published. You're also lucky enough to have a publisher. A lot of people just can't, they don't have that. But I think that your experience as well as your knowledge on your several different genres and topics definitely lend themselves to having a publisher that takes you seriously and gets your work out there.
Well, yes and no. You don't get paid very much from the publisher, and they also don't promote your books anymore unless you're already 100 million copy selling really, really best-selling author. They just don't want to know. They want you to do all the work on social media. So sometimes actually I self-publish and I do much better.
Oh, really?
Oh, absolutely. I already have a certain cash because I am a best-selling author. So my second book was a no-brainer. It's still selling really well. Mm-hmm. Let's see, what is it now? Almost 10 years after it was published, and it still hasn't aged one day. I assume because it was well researched in the first place.
Yeah, you're a thorough person. You're not going to put out information that can
that's
easily
why it takes me so long to write a book. I'm kind of like the band Boston. When they have a good album to come out, 10 years later they'll bring it out.
So I'm going to put a link to your Amazon store where you have a number of different books for sale, but should they visit your website directly? I don't know if you sell directly.
Oh, God, yes.
So
otherwise you're giving Jeff Bezos the money. He's already got enough money.
He's the richest person on the planet from what I understand.
Yeah, and he's not doing authors any favors either, and I'm not going to go into the sordid history of how he treats people. But no, the books eventually come from me anyway, so you might as well, support, if you can, support your author, because then I get 50% of the money, unlike going through Amazon where I get substantially less.
So invisibletemple.com is your website. Do you do any type of autographs or anything like that, or do you do...
I'll stick my thumbprint on it if you want it.
I finally got his thumbprint.
Yes, I even addressed the envelopes myself.
What?
I'm kind of like Stephen King in that respect. Stephen's he's Maine's other best-selling author.
Yeah.
I really get given a hard time by TSA at security at Portland Airport. It's a lovely place, actually. They really know me. And they said, hey, New England's not a best-selling author. How many books are you behind Stephen King? And I said, well, today I sold one copy. I'm only 98 million copies behind, but I am catching up. But you know what? Stephen still actually, if you go to his house, there's a little chute, and you put a copy of your book in the chute. It goes into his house, and he comes back 20 seconds later signed. So
really? I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah, he's a cool guy.
He's a constant writer. He's just always...
if you live in Maine and you understand the weather, you can write like that forever until the cows come home.
I should move there then. We're very close to the JFK, so every time I start writing anything or getting a thought, a 757 goes over my head.
Oh dear.
It hasn't been bad today, but normally people are like, "Do you live at the airport?" But yeah, we're almost as close as you can possibly be in a good neighborhood, but still be near JFK. Wow. Yeah, it's pretty awesome. But Freddy, I want to thank you so much for taking the time out to pop on here today. So you're working on right now about the history of New Zealand. Are there any other projects that you're working on?
Oh no, I'm just adding part of that as one of the chapters. I'm actually looking for a missing civilization that existed before the flood 11,000 years ago, and who they might have been and where they may have lived.
It's fascinating.
So talking about making things difficult for yourself, because of course most of that stuff is now under the ocean. So it goes into underwater evidence about lost cities, and certainly about the people that we used to call the gods, in fact. But they're not like people with, shiny little beards and things like that. Back then, gods literally was a tribute that was given to anyone that literally had control over the laws of nature, and they were able to do extraordinary things like, move, 100-ton blocks of rock float through the air, which is one of those myths that you hear all across the world as to how they built the old temples. So it's trying to piece this together, this story together of, who they were, where did they come from, and why did they bother with us after the flood? Because if it wasn't for them, we wouldn't have agriculture, we wouldn't have megalithic temples, we wouldn't have mathematics, astrology, astronomy, and so forth. They were the ones that gave us civilization, and it happened across the face of the earth, literally at the same time in about 8,000 BC. So obviously there was a plan, and I want to find out more about it.
It just sounds like you're just constantly seeking out topics to uncover. It's really fascinating.
Absolutely.
I'd love to reach out to you in the future and have you back on really whenever you want to. But you'll definitely hear from me probably before I hear from you, because you just sound crazy busy.
Well, authors, we got to keep surviving.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's always other sacred sites to travel to.
So yeah, you can find out more about Freddy Silva at invisibletemple.com. I'll put a link to everything in the show notes. I will include your Amazon as well, just because some people just love using that Prime.
Oh, what can I say? Yeah. I'll say it off the air.
This is